I took my wife out to save our marriage, but that night I caught her with another man, and she didn't know I was watching. What happened next changed everything. My name's Jake, I'm 34 years old and I've been married to Emily for a little over 8 years now. We first crossed paths at a friend's house party, and the moment I laid eyes on her, something in me just knew. She had that kind of presence you don't forget. Emily. She could walk into a room and draw every eye without even trying. She was sharp, confident, and stunning in that effortless way. From that first night we just clicked. It was like one of those whirlwind romances you usually only see in movies. I used to believe we were the real deal. Sure, we had our share of disagreements like anyone does, but it always felt like we had something solid. Emily's a lawyer, driven, always juggling 10 things at once. Me. I work in IT, so my days are just as full but in a different kind of way. Somehow, our energies balanced each other. She was the spark and I was the steady ground. It worked. Or at least I thought it did. But things have changed lately. She's been pulling away. Not in an obvious way at first, just little things, like how she stopped texting me throughout the day like she used to. And her phone? It's practically glued to her hand now. I'm not one to jump to conclusions, I've never been the jealous type, but it's hard to ignore when someone you love starts acting like a stranger. I began noticing more. She'd vanish for hours, saying she was out with her girlfriends. Now, Emily's always had her social circle and I never had a problem with that. But lately, something about it felt off. Like there was something just beyond my reach, something she wasn't telling me. Then out of nowhere she suggested we hit a nightclub. That completely threw me. Nightclubs aren't really her thing. Still, I was all in. Things had been tense between us and I figured maybe she was trying to bridge the distance. I wanted to believe she was making an effort, that she still cared. I clung to that hope, honestly. I needed it. So we picked a night. Just us, no phones, no work stuff, just a chance to find our way back to each other. I had no idea that night would be the moment everything shattered. We arrived at the club and for a little while it felt right. The music thumped, the lights were dancing around us and we kind of slipped into this old rhythm. Emily was laughing again, and I hadn't seen that kind of brightness in her smile for a long time. It almost felt like we were getting back to who we used to be. We grabbed a couple drinks and I started to relax. The energy of the place took over and before long we were out there dancing. I've never been much for dancing, to be honest, but Emily? She came alive out there. Watching her move, seeing that joy on her face, it reminded me of all the reasons I fell for her in the first place. I pushed aside the worries I'd been carrying and just let myself enjoy the moment. We must have been out there for hours, but it didn't feel like it. We were just vibing, laughing, enjoying each other. A few more drinks in and it felt easy again. What? I leaned in for a kiss and she met me with that look, the one that always melted me. She kissed me back hard. And in that moment I thought maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way again. Then she pulled back slightly, a playful smirk on her lips. I'm gonna run to the bathroom real quick, she said, still smiling. Be right back. I grinned and nodded. All right, I'll get us another round. She winked, turned, and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there thinking, finally. Things felt good again. I couldn't remember the last time we had a night like this, and it gave me this quiet little hope that we might still be okay. But the longer I waited, the more that hope started to slip away. I stayed by the bar, holding 2 fresh drinks, scanning the crowd. The music was still pumping, people were having a good time, but me? I was frozen in place, eyes locked on the hallway leading to the bathrooms. 5 minutes went by. Then 10. Then 15. I kept checking my phone but resisted the urge to text her. I didn't want to come off as needy. I told myself there must be a line, maybe she ran into a friend. But deep down, that familiar dread crept back in. Where was she? I stood there, the condensation from the glasses soaking into my hands, feeling more and more out of place. Everyone else was caught up in the night, but I felt like I was watching from the outside, waiting for something I couldn't name. Just as I was about to set the drinks down and go find her, I heard a voice from beside me. Hey, are you all right? I turned and saw a young woman, probably mid-20s, standing next to me with a kind expression. Waiting on someone? She asked, glancing at the 2 drinks I hadn't touched. I let out a small laugh, trying to seem laid back. Yeah, just waiting on my wife. She went to the restroom a while ago. The girl gave me a look, one eyebrow lifting as she glanced toward the hallway. That's kind of a long time, isn't it? Her words hit me harder than I expected. Yeah, I replied a little more stiffly. I guess it is. She offered a sympathetic smile, and oddly that made my stomach twist even more. Hope she turns up soon. Looks like those drinks are about to turn lukewarm. I nodded back with a half smile, watching her fade into the crowd. But what she said kept echoing in my head. A long time for the bathroom. I looked down at the glasses in my hands. The ice was already melting. And Emily still hadn't come back. After she walked off, I stayed there for a few more moments, just feeling the weight of everything. Of those drinks, of the silence, of not knowing. My nerves had gone from a quiet buzz to a full-on alarm. I couldn't just stand there anymore. I spotted the girl again, leaning casually against a pillar near the edge of the bar. Something about her calm presence made me feel a little less like I was spiraling. I walked over and gently placed the drinks on the ledge beside her. "You know what?" I said, trying to put on a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Let me buy you a drink, for making me feel like I'm not completely losing it." She let out a soft laugh, clearly not expecting that. "Sure, why not?" she said, a playful edge to her voice. I flagged the bartender down and got her something simple. We chatted for a minute, nothing deep, just the kind of small talk strangers do to pass the time, but my head wasn't in it. My thoughts were still stuck on Emily and that hallway. As I handed her the drink, she gave me a kind look. "I hope everything's okay with your wife." "Yeah," I said quietly, glancing toward the back again. "Me too." I took a breath, the kind that tries to steady you when your heart's about to race out of your chest, and started walking toward the hallway. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, brushing past people dancing and laughing, their joy completely separate from the storm rising inside me. I checked the men's room first, mostly out of habit, though I knew she wouldn't be there. It was empty, of course. Then I stepped over to the women's room. I paused at the door, unsure if I should even go near it. But at that point, I didn't care about appearances anymore. I knocked softly and pushed it open just enough to look inside. Two women were chatting near the mirror, fixing their hair, but Emily wasn't there. I called out her name under my breath, hoping maybe she was in a stall. Nothing. She wasn't there. I stepped back out, the weight in my chest growing heavier by the second. That was when I noticed a door at the far end of the hallway, barely cracked open. I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. My feet moved before my brain could catch up, the dread building with each step. As I got closer, I heard voices. Laughter, soft sounds, then something else, something that made my skin prickle. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open just enough to see inside. And there she was. Emily. My wife. Completely undressed. And she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, shirtless, his body close to hers, his hands all over her like they'd done this before. Like it was normal. The image hit me so hard it felt like my whole body shut down. I couldn't move. Couldn't even blink. Everything in me just stopped. She saw me. Our eyes met and it was like time froze. And in that one moment, everything we'd built, everything I thought we were, collapsed. I didn't say a word. Didn't yell. Didn't cry. I just turned around and walked out. I couldn't bear to be in that room for one more second. My legs moved on autopilot, weaving through the crowd, the club noise suddenly muted like I was underwater. I made it back to the bar somehow, though I couldn't tell you how. The girl from before was still there. She looked up and caught my eyes the moment I appeared, and something in her softened immediately. She must have seen it on my face, that look you get when your whole world caves in. "Hey, are you okay?" she asked gently, but I couldn't find the words. Then, from the corner of my eye, I caught sight of Emily. She came rushing out of that back room, her clothes half on, panic all over her face as she tried to make her way through the crowd toward me. My stomach turned, but oddly, I didn't feel angry. Or sad. Just nothing. I was completely numb. I didn't want to hear whatever excuses she was about to throw at me. I didn't want to know how she planned to spin it. I just needed to leave. So before I lost my nerve, I turned to the girl and said, "You want to get out of here?" She looked surprised for a second, like she wasn't sure what I meant, but then nodded without hesitation. "Yeah. Let's go." I reached for the girl's hand and we moved fast, weaving through the crowd like we were trying to outrun something we couldn't quite name. The music pounded around us, lights flickering in a frenzy, but all of it felt far away, like I was drifting through a dream I couldn't wake up from. As we pushed through the front entrance, I heard Emily behind us. "Jake. Jake, wait." Her voice cracked through the noise, urgent and full of panic. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. The cool night air hit us like a wave the moment we stepped outside. Just then, a cab rolled up to the curb, headlights cutting through the dark. I opened the door for her, and we slid in without hesitation. "Anywhere but here," I told the driver, the words barely escaping my tight throat. As we started to pull away, I caught a glimpse of Emily bursting out of the club doors. Her face was pale, her expression frantic, her hands still fumbling with her clothes. "Jake. Please, wait." She tried to chase us down, her voice growing more desperate with each step, but it was no use. The taxi picked up speed, and soon her figure began to blur in the rearview mirror, her voice fading into the night until there was nothing left of her but silence. I should have felt something right then. Rage, grief, even pity. But I didn't. I was numb. Completely and utterly hollowed out. The girl sitting beside me looked over, sensing the tension, but she didn't say a word. We sat there, swallowed by the quiet hum of the city, both lost in our own silence. And just like that, we were gone. I didn't know what I'd be walking into when I finally got home, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever life we had before was over. For the first few minutes we rode in silence. The streetlights streamed through the windows, casting shadows across the seat. I stared out, trying to hold on to something, anything, that didn't feel like it was slipping through my fingers. But my mind kept playing the same scene over and over, Emily with that man, her body, her eyes, the betrayal. I needed something to silence the loop in my head. Then something shifted. Maybe it was the surge of adrenaline still pulsing through me, or maybe I just needed to feel like I still existed. I looked at the girl next to me, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in. Her eyes widened for a moment, surprised, but then she met me halfway. We kissed, deep, hungry, almost reckless. Her hands found my chest as I pulled her in closer, our breaths quick and uneven. The city disappeared outside those windows, replaced by the fire building between us. The driver said nothing, his eyes fixed forward, and I barely noticed. The only thing I could focus on was the sensation of escaping the weight of everything I had just lost. By the time we pulled up in front of my house, I was shaking, not from nerves but from something raw and electric. We stumbled out of the car, tangled in each other's arms, the cold air biting at us as we rushed toward the front door. I fumbled with my keys, heart pounding as we practically fell inside. Clothes came off in a blur as we made our way to the bedroom. It wasn't romantic. It was wild, desperate, fueled by everything I was trying to forget. Her soft gasps, the feel of her skin, the crashing of lips, it was all a blur of emotion, of pain trying to transform into something else. Meanwhile, somewhere out in the city, Emily must have jumped into a cab of her own. I didn't check my phone. I didn't care. She was probably calling, texting, pleading. But in that moment, none of it could reach me. I was locked in the now, with this stranger, with this fire that numbed the ache just enough. I didn't hear the front door creak open. I didn't hear the quiet footsteps coming down the hall. All I knew was the girl in my arms, the escape we were clinging to like it might save us. And then it ended. I opened my eyes and there she was. Emily. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom just a few feet away. Her face was ghost white, her mouth slightly open, eyes locked on us like she'd walked straight into a nightmare. I froze. Time seemed to stop, the heat in the room vanishing in an instant. My chest felt like it had caved in. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. There she was, my wife, watching it all unfold. Watching me. And suddenly, everything felt heavier than I could carry. I stared at Emily as she stood frozen in the doorway. Her eyes were wide, full of disbelief, and I could see the pain ripple across her face. But I didn't feel sorry. Not even close. There was no guilt left in me, just this hollow, icy stillness. This wasn't just about what happened tonight. This was about everything she'd buried beneath years of secrets. And now she was face to face with the consequences of her own choices. Still lying in bed, I didn't bother to get up. I just met her eyes and let the bitterness rise in my throat. So, I said, my voice hard and sharp, how's it feel to watch it from this side? Nice view, isn't it? She flinched like my words slapped her, but I kept going. I had to. What were you expecting, Emily? That you could walk out of that back room and pretend nothing ever happened? That I'd be too blind to notice? Too quiet to react? I shook my head. Well, here it is. This is what you made. Her eyes welled with tears. She opened her mouth like she wanted to explain, to say something that might soften the blow, but nothing came out. Then just like that she turned and bolted, disappearing down the hallway. I heard the front door slam behind her, footsteps fading into the night. I let out a long, shaky breath and sank deeper into the bed, my heart still pounding. Beside me, the woman, her name was Samantha, slowly sat up, pulling the blanket up around her. She looked over at me, her eyes kind, full of quiet understanding. She didn't judge. She didn't ask questions. And after everything that just happened, I was grateful for that. She's not coming back tonight, I muttered, eyes still fixed on the ceiling. Not after this. Samantha just gave a small nod. She didn't say anything, just let the silence settle between us. And in that quiet space, something cracked open inside me. I started talking. Slowly at first, but then the words came faster. About Emily, the months of doubt, the gut feelings I'd ignored, the years I spent pretending things were okay when they weren't. She listened without interrupting. Later, I'd find out she worked as a psychotherapist, though she made it clear she wasn't there to fix me. But in that moment, just having someone hear me, really hear me, was more than I realized I needed. She gave me space to unravel everything that had been bottled up for so long. By the time the first light of morning spilled through the blinds, I felt drained, physically, emotionally, in every way a person could be. Samantha had been patient, present. I didn't push her away, not even after Emily had seen us. If anything, I was glad she stayed. But as the sunlight warmed the room, Samantha stood and began to get dressed. Her voice was soft, almost like she didn't want to disturb the fragile quiet. "You've got a lot to process," she said with a small, knowing smile. "But you'll get through this. You're stronger than you think." I didn't ask her to stay. We both understood this wasn't something that would last. What we shared was a spark in the middle of a wreckage, brief, intense, and born from chaos. She left quietly, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself alone. I dragged myself downstairs, every step heavy with the weight of the night before. I poured a cup of coffee, still warm in the pot, but it did little to numb the ache inside me. The house was still. Too still. The silence pressed in from every corner, reminding me that the damage was done. Then I heard something, soft, almost hesitant. I turned slowly, and there she was. "Emily." She stood in the doorway to the kitchen, looking completely shattered. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes bloodshot, and her whole body looked like it was holding itself together by a thread. She didn't say a word at first. Just stared at me like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. I took a slow sip from my coffee, feeling the heat against my lips, but nothing inside me warmed. She stayed there watching me, waiting. And I knew I had to speak. I couldn't avoid it any longer. Setting the cup on the counter, I looked at her and said plainly, "It's over, Emily." Her expression changed, shock then fear. "Jake, please," she whispered, stepping into the room. "I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you. But it didn't mean anything. I swear. Please don't walk away from this. Don't walk away from us." Her voice broke as the words poured out, fast and panicked. Her hands trembled as she reached out toward me, but I stepped back, holding the space between us like a wall. "You think I can unsee what I saw?" I asked, my voice steady but heavy. "You think this is something I can just push aside and keep going like nothing happened?" She sobbed, her knees giving out as she gripped the edge of the doorway. "It was a mistake," she cried. "I don't even know why I did it. I was lost, confused, I'm sorry. Jake, please. Don't let it end like this." But I couldn't reach for her. I couldn't soften what had already hardened in me. "You didn't just cheat on me, Emily," I said quietly. "You took something sacred and shattered it. And I can't rebuild what's already broken." I shook my head slowly, the certainty in my chest cold and immovable. Her words couldn't reach me anymore. "No, Emily. This is the end. That night, the second you walked into that room with him, you made a choice. You didn't just cheat, you gave up on us. You threw away everything we had." Her sobs grew softer, less frantic. It was like she was finally realizing that nothing she could say would undo what had been done. The desperation faded from her eyes, replaced by something much quieter, resignation. She wiped at her face with trembling fingers, and when she finally spoke again, her voice was faint, cracked. "I'm sorry," she whispered, almost like she was speaking to herself. "I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want any of it to end like this." But I couldn't listen to apologies anymore. The weight of what she'd done was too much. The damage was too deep. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my voice even but filled with finality. "You need to pack up your things. Stay with your mom, a friend, I don't care where you go. Just not here. Not anymore." Emily stared at me for a moment, stunned. The reality of it landed hard. She didn't fight me. She didn't argue. After a long silence, she nodded, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. "I'll go to my mom's," she said quietly, her voice hollow. "I'll get my stuff and leave tonight." Then, without another word, she turned and made her way upstairs. Each step sounded like it took everything out of her. I stood still in the kitchen, listening to the muffled sounds of drawers opening, zippers closing, and hangers clicking as she packed up her life. The finality of it all hit me like a slow, heavy wave. And then I heard the front door open. A long pause. And finally, it closed behind her. Emily was gone. The days that followed were hazy. The house felt painfully quiet, like it was echoing memories from a life I wasn't part of anymore. I buried myself in work, hoping to outrun the silence. But every so often, the weight of it, the divorce, the betrayal, would crash down on me all over again. It was a Wednesday evening and I was sitting at the kitchen table, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to feel anything other than the ache in my chest. That's when I heard a soft knock at the door. It startled me. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a split second I thought maybe Emily had come back. But when I opened the door, my heart skipped a beat. It was Samantha. She stood there, a little uncertain, but with that same calm kindness in her eyes that I remembered from the night everything fell apart. I hadn't seen her since that night, and honestly, I had convinced myself that what happened between us was a one-time thing, born of heartbreak and chaos. But now here she was standing on my porch. "Hey," she said quietly, her smile a little unsure. "I hope this isn't strange. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I wanted to check in, see how you've been holding up." I just stood there stunned. Then, almost without thinking, I smiled. A real one. The first one in days. "Samantha," I said, my voice catching just a bit. "I'm really glad you're here. Come on in." She stepped inside and suddenly the house didn't feel so empty. Something shifted the moment she walked through the door. She shrugged off her coat, and after a few awkward, quiet moments, we found ourselves sitting at the kitchen table, talking like old friends. "You hungry?" I asked after a while. I was about to cook something. "Stay and eat with me?" Her eyes brightened and she smiled in that gentle way she did. "I'd love to." We spent the next hour in the kitchen together, just the two of us, moving in sync, preparing a simple pasta dish and sipping wine like we'd done this 100 times before. It wasn't a fancy dinner, but somehow it felt bigger than just food. It felt like the beginning of something, steady, quiet, real. As we cooked, we talked about everything. Life, work, even the mess I was in. Samantha didn't flinch. She listened without interruption, without judging or offering pity. She didn't try to fix me, she just gave me space to say everything I hadn't been able to say, not even to myself. There was something freeing about that. Like I could finally breathe again. I found myself telling her things I hadn't even admitted out loud before. And in between the heavy stuff, I laughed. I laughed at her stories, her impressions, her way of making light out of the darkest corners. For the first time in what felt like forever, I smiled without forcing it. We ended up on the couch, wine glasses in hand, just talking and letting the night drift by. It didn't feel like a date, but the connection was unmistakable. There was something comforting in the way she leaned in when I spoke, or how our hands brushed now and then. But it wasn't rushed and it wasn't physical. It was simple and warm, something I hadn't known I'd been missing. "I'm really glad you came by," I said, leaning back into the cushions, a bit of the heaviness in my chest finally lifting. I didn't realize how badly I needed this. She looked at me, soft and sincere. "I'm glad I did too. I couldn't stop thinking about you. I just wanted to make sure you were okay." "I'm not yet," I admitted, "but I'm getting there. And having you here, it helps." She smiled and nodded, her hand brushing mine again, not by accident this time. We didn't rush the night. When it finally came time for her to leave, she stood at the door and pulled me into a gentle hug. I held on to her for a second longer than I expected. As she walked out, the house felt different. Not empty, just peaceful. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of something I thought I'd lost. Hope. What followed was a slow, quiet transformation. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was painful and drawn out, as most endings are, but when the papers were signed and the final meeting ended, I walked out not with rage or regret, but with a deep, weary relief. A chapter had closed. And during those months, Samantha never disappeared. What I thought would be a fleeting connection born in chaos became something steady. Something I could rely on. She stopped by after work sometimes. Brought takeout or a bottle of wine or just herself. We'd talk, sometimes watch something on TV, sometimes just sit in silence. No pressure. No expectations. She let me move at my own pace and slowly the storm inside me began to quiet. The nights felt less heavy. My memories of Emily lost their sharp edges. What had once been pain started to feel more like distance. And all the while Samantha stayed, calm, thoughtful, never pushing, never asking for more than I could give. And eventually something shifted. I stopped thinking of her as the woman from that one terrible night. She became Samantha, a real part of my life. Someone who made me laugh, who made the silence feel safe, who showed up when I needed it most. She didn't rescue me. She didn't try to. But she helped me find solid ground again. One evening we were sitting on the couch, same spot we always found ourselves in, when I turned to her and said, "You know, I never expected this. Any of it. But I'm really glad you're here." She smiled, reaching for my hand. "Me too, Jake." From there, things unfolded naturally. It didn't feel like a new relationship. It felt like a continuation of something we'd already started. We took our time, we let it grow. And somewhere along the way, what had begun as a comfort turned into something I couldn't imagine my life without. My past with Emily no longer haunted me. I could think about it without feeling hollow. She became just that, a part of my past. And Samantha? She became my present. And if I'm honest, maybe even my future. Life wasn't perfect, but it was healing. As for Emily, I'd hear snippets from mutual friends or pass her in town every once in a while. She never looked my way. The light in her eyes had dimmed. I heard she was back at her mom's, still trying to piece things together. She hadn't moved on, not really. Her choices caught up with her in ways she hadn't expected. But her life wasn't mine to carry anymore. And that realization, that freedom, meant everything. The end.